For all of this, let's bring in former prosecutor Peter Brill, who joins us here in studio. How much trouble is Manafort in for violating a judge's gag order and for trying to have this ghost-written op-ed put out there?
Well, the one thing that prosecutors and courts, of course, are concerned about is the appearance of impropriety, trying to influence the system outside of the judicial process. You're in a situation now where Manafort is trying to try this case in the court of public opinion, which lawyers often do, but here the judge specifically said that was no good. There was a gag order on this case. Manafort clearly tried to get around that by having someone else's name on this op-ed in some small Ukrainian English language newspaper, but I don't think the prosecutors or the judge are going to take kindly to that.
I know you're a former prosecutor and not a psychologist, but can you please try to get into his mind and explain to me why he's ghostwriting something with someone with ties to Russian intelligence?
Well, now, just like Mr. Dowd said, he wrote the tweet the other day. Now we have a Ukrainian politician saying that he wrote this entirely on his own and just asked Manafort for edits, which seems strange. But
that reminds me of Trump's lawyer saying he wrote the tweet and not Trump. I guess that's the new playbook now,
yeah,
but
exactly.
Neither here nor there. Continue. No.
But yeah, Mr. Manafort he's a lobbyist, and so his natural instinct, I think, is to lobby. And especially with type A personalities, Manafort, Trump surrounds himself with people just like that. Their aim is always to defend themselves. They think the lawyers, who are maybe a little quieter, a little more professional, aren't actually doing the job that they could do themselves if only they got the gloves off and were able to get in there themselves. And it's an instinct that's very hard to fight against, especially with an ego like his. I
want to ask you about the overall investigation in just a sec, but what do you make of Dowd suggesting, oh, Deutsche Bank says they didn't receive a subpoena? It's not true.
Well, subpoenas are often going to come with language to the effect of you shouldn't be sharing the fact that you got this subpoena. And in fact, if you do, this might be an obstruction of justice in itself, because you're going to be interfering with an ongoing investigation if you are telling the target of your investigation that we got a subpoena for your records. So Deutsche Bank, I mean, these are Swiss banks. They are famous for their secrecy, right? German, excuse me.
Shane and I were having the conversation the other day about the overall investigation, the charges against Michael Flynn, and so far there's no evidence of collusion. So wouldn't that suggest that the special counsel Mueller doesn't have such evidence because of the charges, that this was a process charge for lying to the FBI? He could have, I suppose, if he had the evidence or thought he had the evidence, brought a conspiracy to collude against Michael Flynn, but he didn't. What does that say?
Mr. Mueller is a very experienced prosecutor, and he knows, just like we all know from watching primetime TV, that you start with the small fish and you work your way up to the big fish. You start with the small charges, you flip the small players, and you try to work your way up to larger charges. So this is clearly the very beginning of an investigation, and we're already seeing pretty scary results.
Let's talk about Deutsche Bank for a second. Very corrupt bank, plagued by scandals, especially recently got a lot of press because they were hiding hundreds of billions of dollars for Russians. Any connections between that, you think, and going after Trump?
We know that the Kushner companies, Jared Kushner's family's business, has a it's like a $1.2 or $1.5 billion note that's coming due in 2019 on his building here in Manhattan, 666 Fifth Avenue. We know that the Trump organization lives on debt, so they have dozens, possibly hundreds of loans that are coming due any day now, and any request or any concern that Russian banks might be buying up this debt to influence the administration is clearly a target of Mueller's investigation.
Right. It's interesting because Trump has said, you can't go after my finances, it's outside the scope of the investigation, but it seems pretty clear that if Trump has ties to Russia, financial ties, they might have something on him, and that's certainly something that the special investigator, the special prosecutor would want to look at, right?
They certainly would want to look at it, most importantly because they have not yet gotten to the question of why Trump would be doing any of this, why anyone in the campaign would be colluding with the Russians. What do the Russians have? It's not simply to get a pat on the back that they were somehow trying to arrange a deal prior to coming into office and succeeding where the Obama administration somehow failed. There has to be some sort of leverage point that the Russians have over somebody in the Trump organization, possibly Kushner, possibly the Trump organization itself, and that is ultimately where this investigation is going.
Speaking of leverage, I want to try one more time to see if I can somehow convince you to say something negative about Special Counsel Mueller or about the way this investigation is going. And here's why. Because a lot of prosecutors have suggested that, look, you don't cut a deal with somebody in advance. That what you do is you say, look, we're going to, if you want to cooperate, that's fine, but we're going to charge you with the evidence that we have against you. And then if you cooperate, then we go in front of the judge and we have a downward departure on sentencing and you get a break there. There have been a lot of people who suggested, oh, because it was a simple process charge, there's Mueller negotiating in advance and cutting a deal with him in advance. And therefore, but the other flip side of it is that he doesn't have anything more.
In order to get into a grand jury, you need evidence. Right. So you need Flynn to testify. You need the Papadopoulos to testify. So whatever leverage he has, he's got to use. He's got to enter into these cooperation agreements.
Exactly, which suggests that he is using the best leverage that he has, and the best leverage.
He's showing all his cards now?
Right. That's the point. That if he had leverage of a criminal conspiracy that involved unknown conspirators, possibly including the president, he would have put that in the plea agreement. If he doesn't have that, he has whatever evidence he has, which is just lying to the FBI, which according to some legal analysts would suggest that Mueller doesn't have very much.
But then why is the investigation continuing with Deutsche Bank? Why does he keep going if there's nothing else there?
Maybe another part of the investigation, but at least right now we don't have the collusion part, which may be where he's going with the Deutsche Bank. All we have right now is the process of trying to obstruct the investigation.
Again, there's still a question of what is at the core of that. Why are they doing it? They're not doing it. Are they doing it just to please the boss? It's possible. But is there something deeper? Is there something more sinister there? And ultimately, it may take months to find that out. But again, it's going to be a methodical investigation. We're not going to find out tomorrow.
But to what Shane and I have been talking about, he may not be there yet, right? In other words, he may simply have, okay, we've got something for an obstruction, but we don't have any evidence that anybody, Flynn, the president, anybody else actually colluded.
And we don't know really anything that he knows, that the special prosecutor knows. You know, the Democratic lawmakers actually went to Deutsche Bank and tried to get those accounts and were told, no, thank you. So the special prosecutor can get a lot more access than any of us could ever hope to.
And they're very good at keeping their information close to the vest.
But we like to read the tea leaves. And Peter, that's why we're so thrilled to have you on to help us. Peter Brill, former prosecutor, thanks for doing this. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. All right, still to come on Crossroads, we will tell you the remarkable story of a man captured by the Syrian regime who made it to America, and now he's trying to hold his jailers accountable.
Plus, the Israeli army is concerned over the dwindling numbers of young men and women who are willing to serve on the front lines. Details coming up.